What happens when a man so rich he thinks silence can be purchased points a finger at Judge Frank Caprio and says, "You have no idea who you're humiliating." Drop a comment telling us what you think should happen to anyone who threatens a judge in open court, because the next 8 minutes changed everything. Before this story is over, a tailored suit, a polished empire, and a lifetime of arrogance will collide with something money has never been able to control: truth. And if you believe power should never outrank justice, hit that subscribe button right now, because this case starts with a threat and ends with a lesson nobody in that courtroom would ever forget. Like this video, if you've ever watched someone walk into a room thinking they owned it, only to realize the room belonged to the truth. Share this with someone who still believes character matters more than status, because what happened inside Providence Municipal Court that Monday morning felt less like a hearing and more like a reckoning. At 9:12 a.m. on September 14, 2025, the air inside Courtroom 2 at 325 Washington Street in Providence, Rhode Island, felt heavier than usual. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, papers shifted, shoes scraped tile. The gallery was fuller than normal for a municipal housing and public safety docket, and people were whispering before the judge had even taken the bench. Some had come because word spread fast. Others came because they had nowhere else to go. A few came because what happened to them had followed them into their sleep. Then he walked in. Adrian Mercer, 43 years old, founder and CEO of Mercer Urban Holdings, estimated net worth just north of $90 million depending on which glossy magazine was flattering him that quarter. He wore a charcoal Brioni suit cut so clean it looked poured onto him. His tie was Hermes, midnight blue with a silver pin. His watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus, flashed once when he adjusted his cuff. His shoes were black Gucci loafers polished like obsidian. He didn't walk into the courtroom like a defendant. He walked in like a man inspecting a property he planned to acquire. Outside, his black 2024 Bentley Bentayga Azure had been left idling too long at the curb until a Providence parking officer tapped the tinted window and told the driver to move it. Even that small moment irritated him. He was not used to being told to move. The clerk, Maria Lopes, glanced over the top of her glasses when she saw him. Bailiff Leon Briggs straightened his shoulders, not because he was intimidated, but because he recognized the type. Everyone in public service does eventually. The kind of man who mistakes calm authority for weakness. The kind who hears rules and assumes they are suggestions for other people. Judge Frank Caprio entered at 9:15 sharp, black robe, steady eyes, that familiar expression that managed to be warm and unshakable at the same time. The murmur died immediately. You could hear the creak of the gallery benches. You could hear a woman in the back trying to steady her breathing. You could hear Adrian Mercer exhale through his nose like the whole process bored him already. Case number PMC HV 251184 was called. Mercer Urban Holdings versus City of Providence, Housing and Public Safety Division. Multiple citations. Obstruction of emergency egress. Failure to remedy hazardous wiring. Retaliatory lock change on occupied units. Unlawful intimidation of reporting tenants. One contested towing violation. One contempt motion tied to interference with responding officers. On paper, it looked like the kind of hearing a wealthy developer could dispatch in 15 minutes with a high-priced attorney and a few polished sentences. That was the first mistake. His second mistake was speaking before the judge finished reading the file. "With respect, Your Honor," Adrian said, not sounding respectful at all, "this is a politically motivated circus over minor administrative issues. My company houses over 1,100 residents across Providence. We improve neighborhoods nobody else would touch. This entire matter should have been settled privately." There it was, the first note of arrogance. Clean, crisp, practiced. The sound of a man who had spent too long being the loudest voice in every room. Judge Caprio looked at him for a beat. Mr. Mercer, the courtroom is private enough for the truth and public enough for accountability. That usually works well for everyone. A few people in the gallery looked at each other immediately. That line landed. Even Dana Ruiz, a local reporter from Channel 12 sitting near the aisle with a legal pad and a phone on silent, stopped writing for a second. She knew a quote when she heard one. Adrian gave a thin smile. It was the kind people give when they're deciding whether to be offended or strategic. Then I hope the truth is efficient, Judge. My schedule is very tight. Judge Caprio folded his hands. Justice has outlived many tight schedules. A low whisper moved across the benches. Somebody actually let out a short breath that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. If you've ever seen a powerful person get uncomfortable the first time they realize charm isn't working, drop a comment telling us the exact moment you knew this hearing was about to go sideways. Because the gallery knew before Adrian did. Behind Adrian sat his attorney, Nolan Pierce, 51, silver tie, expensive briefcase, a man whose entire career had been built on reducing messy human suffering into procedural language. He leaned forward and whispered something. Adrian didn't nod. He didn't need to. He had long ago developed the habit of hearing advice as background noise. In the second row sat Alina Torres, age 31, wearing a pale green Target cardigan over thrifted black slacks, hair pulled back too tightly because she'd barely slept. Beside her sat her 8-year-old daughter Mia, small legs dangling, clutching an inhaler with both hands. Alina had requested permission to attend because she didn't trust what people in suits say happened unless she could hear it in the room herself. 2 seats over sat Walter Green, 68, retired utility lineman, Marine veteran, left wrist still wrapped from a fracture that hadn't healed right. He wore his only blazer, brown and shiny at the elbows, and kept adjusting the hearing aid in his right ear. His apartment had filled with smoke that August night when the alarm failed to trigger on time. Next to him sat Jamal Price, 17, Central High senior, grocery delivery rider, one side of his neck still marked by a shiny pink burn scar that climbed above his collar. He had missed the first week of school because of skin graft follow-ups. He kept his hands folded so tightly his knuckles looked bloodless. 3 victims, 3 names, 3 lives Adrian Mercer's attorney had referred to in the filing as occupant complaints. That was the third mistake. Because Judge Caprio did not read the room the way rich men read rooms. He read it the way old-school judges do. He saw who was trying not to cry. He saw whose jaw was set in pain. He saw who had arrived certain he'd leave untouched. "Mr. Pierce," Caprio said, "before I hear argument, I want the city's evidence summarized on the record." Assistant City Solicitor Naomi Chen stood, 36, navy suit, no wasted motion, stack of binders tabbed in fluorescent colors. She was not dramatic by nature, which made what happened next even more devastating. "Your Honor, the city alleges that Mercer Urban Holdings failed to address repeated electrical hazards at 114 Atwells Avenue, known commercially as Mercer Lofts West. We have inspection reports dated May 3, June 12, and July 28. We have tenant letters. We have maintenance logs. We have body camera footage from August 22, 2025, at 11:47 p.m., when Providence Fire and EMS responded to smoke conditions and blocked egress. We also have surveillance footage from the lobby and east stairwell." Adrian shifted, barely, just enough for Leon Briggs to notice. Naomi continued, "We further allege that after the incident, management changed the rear access lock without notice, disabled 2 tenant key fobs, and ordered the towing of a resident vehicle belonging to Mr. Walter Green, despite his disability placard and active appeal. Finally, during officer response, Mr. Mercer personally interfered with emergency personnel and threatened city employees." Nolan Pierce stood fast. "Objection to tone, counsel is arguing." Naomi didn't look at him, Judge Caprio did. Overruled. If facts sound accusatory, the solution is not softer facts. Another whisper. Another pen stopped moving. Dana Ruiz's eyes widened. She wrote the quote down twice. Adrian leaned toward the microphone. This is absurd. Those so-called threats were business language in a chaotic moment. Judge Caprio tilted his head. Business language. Is that what we call pressure when someone else has to live under it? For the first time, Adrian's smile disappeared completely. Now here's where the story changes, and if you're still watching, stay with me, because the next layer is the one nobody in that room expected. Hit subscribe if you want more stories where arrogance walks in first and regret follows right behind it. The origin of Adrian Mercer's empire did not look evil from the outside. That was part of what made it so dangerous. He had grown up in Fox Point, the son of a bookkeeper and a drywall subcontractor who drank too hard after losing steady work in 2008. He liked to tell magazine interviewers that he learned resilience early. What he left out was how quickly resilience can curdle into contempt if success arrives before wisdom does. By 32, Adrian had flipped 2 condemned multi-family buildings into short-term luxury rentals. By 36, he was buying distressed properties in neighborhoods City Hall had ignored for years. By 40, he was being photographed at charity galas beside hospital donors and university trustees, a man in monogrammed cuffs talking about revitalization. But the tenants living inside his revitalized buildings knew another version. They knew the broken intercoms that stayed broken, the heat complaints rooted to voicemail, the rent hikes hidden behind cosmetic upgrades, the maintenance men told to paint over stains instead of tracing leaks, the way emergency repairs seemed to happen overnight when a camera crew might visit, but not when a nurse aide on a double shift sent 3 emails about burning wires behind her kitchen wall. Alina Torres had moved into Mercer Lofts West in March 2024 after leaving an abusive relationship in Pawtucket. She picked the apartment because it was close to the bus line to Rhode Island Hospital, where she worked nights sanitizing patient rooms. Unit 3B was tiny, but it had tall windows and a little strip of afternoon sun on the floor that Mia liked to call the Gold Square. Alina thought that meant maybe life was changing. Maybe this would be the place where their fear finally stopped following them. Then the lights started flickering. Then came the smell. Hot plastic, burning dust, that bitter electrical odor you never forget once you've smelled it for real. She filed a maintenance request on May 1 at 6:43 a.m., another on May 18. Another on June 9 after sparks popped behind the outlet near Mia's bed. Jamal Price, who lived downstairs with his grandmother and spent weekends fixing bikes in the courtyard, saw the same issue in the hallway panel outside too. Walter Green heard a buzzing in the wall near his kitchen and recorded it on his phone because nobody believed old men talking about wires unless there was a timestamp. The city inspector came. Naomi Chen's office documented scorched insulation near a utility chase. A repair order was issued. It was marked complete 3 days later. It had never been completed. That detail mattered because on August 22, a Friday night heavy with late summer humidity, somebody plugged a floor fan into a compromised line in Unit 4C at 11:41 p.m. The surge hit. At 11:44, smoke pushed into the east hallway. At 11:46, Mia Torres woke up coughing so hard she slid out of bed and hit the floor trying to reach her inhaler. At 11:47, the first 911 call came from Jamal, who had already run upstairs barefoot, banging on doors. At 11:49, the rear exit failed. The chain had been installed weeks earlier after management complained about unauthorized entry from a side alley. Not a city-approved security door, not a panic release system, a chain and commercial padlock. Walter Green got halfway down the smoke-filled stairs before collapsing against the wall. Jamal tried to lift him with one arm while wrapping his own sleeve over his mouth. Elena carried Mia on one hip and used the other hand to feel along the wall because visibility was nearly gone. Somebody screamed. Somebody fell. A fire alarm stuttered 3 times and then went dead. By the time firefighters breached the rear access, Mia's oxygen saturation had dropped dangerously low. Walter's wrist cracked when 2 men pulled him clear. Jamal's neck was burned by superheated air when he turned back toward the stairwell to see if anyone else was trapped. And Adrian Mercer. He arrived at 12:08 a.m. in the same black Bentley, angry about the optics before he was worried about the people. That line came from Officer Tessa Bell's body camera note, and it wasn't the worst line in the file. Judge Caprio turned one page, then another. He didn't rush. That somehow made it worse for Adrian. Rich men like speed when they're in trouble. Speed feels like control. "Mr. Mercer," Caprio said quietly, "did you personally visit the scene on August 23 just after midnight?" Adrian's chin lifted. "I did, yes, because unlike what the city wants to imply, I'm a hands-on owner." Naomi Chen spoke without looking up from her binder. He also instructed staff to keep residents in the lobby and not allow them back upstairs for medication retrieval until he had spoken with his insurer. Nolan Pierce was up again, hearsay. Naomi slid a printed still photograph onto the evidence card, captured on surveillance audio. The gallery went very still. Adrian's left thumb tapped once against the edge of the table, first sign of stress, small but real. Judge Caprio looked toward Maria Lopes. "Let's mark the surveillance clip." And that was the moment the room shifted from tense to electric. Because everyone in that courtroom could feel it. There is a difference between accusation and playback, a difference between what somebody says happened and what a room is about to hear with its own ears. Before that video rolled, Adrian Mercer still believed he was in a hearing. He was actually standing on the edge of an unveiling. Like this video, if you've ever said, "Just show the footage," because that's exactly where this went next. The first clip was timestamped 12:10:14 a.m., grainy but clear enough. Mercer Loft's West Lobby, fluorescent light, smoke haze drifting in from the hall, tenants gathered near the front doors. Elena Torres crouched on the tile floor with Mia wrapped in a blanket. Jamal stood shirtless with burn ointment smeared across his neck. Walter Green sat slumped on a folding chair, hands shaking, soot on his forehead. 2 firefighters moved in and out of frame. Then Adrian Mercer entered from the revolving front door, phone at his ear, one hand pressed over the microphone. Even on silent playback, his posture communicated annoyance before concern. The clip had audio. "I don't care what they're saying," he snapped into the phone. "Nobody mentions lock issues. We had a security upgrade. That's the language." A ripple of disbelief moved through the gallery. He turned toward the building manager, Luis Ortega, and said, "Keep them in the lobby until legal gets here. I don't need people running upstairs filming every outlet and cracked wall for social media. If anybody asks, we acted immediately." Then came the sentence that would replay online for days. "Insurance hates panic. Don't let them create a story." The sound in the courtroom wasn't loud. It was sharper than loud, a collective inhale. A woman whispered, "Oh my God." Jamal stared at the screen without blinking. Elena dropped her face into her hand for a second, like hearing it again hurt more than the first time. Walter Green muttered something under his breath that nobody could make out except the last word, shame. Nolan Pierce stood halfway and sat back down. There are moments even seasoned attorneys recognize as unwinnable in real time. This was one of them. Adrian cleared his throat. "That's taken out of context." Judge Caprio's eyes stayed on the monitor. "Context is a very loyal thing, Mr. Mercer. It usually arrives right behind the words." A second clip rolled, this one from Officer Tessa Bell's body cam. The camera shook as she moved through the lobby. Smoke alarms chirped intermittently. Someone cried in the background. Bell asked, "Who's in charge here?" Adrian stepped into frame. "I am. This building is privately managed, and these tenants need to stop speaking to press until we assess liability." Officer Bell said, "Sir, step back. EMS is trying to clear access." Adrian replied, "Do you know what I pay in property taxes? Don't instruct me inside my own building." She said, "This is now an active emergency scene." He leaned in closer. "Then maybe remember who funds half this city before you start performing." At that, Leon Briggs looked from the screen to Adrian slowly, the way a bailiff does when he's recalculating how quickly a hearing might become something else. Judge Caprio didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mr. Mercer, did you just describe emergency response as performing?" Adrian's jaw clenched. Again, that was a chaotic situation. "Chaos," Caprio said, "reveals character faster than comfort ever will." Dana Ruiz didn't even pretend to be casual now. She typed that one straight into a draft headline. The city then introduced 3 tenant letters. The first, from Alina Torres, was dated June 12 and written in careful block handwriting because English was her second language and she wanted every word understood. She described flickering lights, a failed breaker, and Mia's asthma. She wrote, "Please help before something bad happen. I work all night. I'm scared to sleep." The second letter, from Walter Green, included photos of scorch marks near his sink. The third, from Jamal Price, was an email forwarded from a school account because he didn't have a proper tenant portal login. Subject line: "Hallway electrical popping sound again." All 3 had been received. All 3 had been marked deferred. Then Naomi Chen lifted a 4th document. "This is from Mr. Luis Ortega, former building manager, terminated August 25, she said. His signed statement indicates he was instructed by senior leadership to delay full electrical replacement until after a lender walkthrough scheduled for September 3. Nolan was on his feet instantly. "We challenge foundation. My client denies that categorically." Naomi nodded. "So did he deny the text messages?" She held up printed screenshots. 11:02 a.m. August 4. "Lewis, electrician says East Stack needs full shutoff and rewiring. Unsafe if load spikes." Adrian Patchett, "We are not tearing up walls before refinance photos." Lewis, "What if something happens?" Adrian, "Then you call me before you call anyone else." That was the moment the room lost its remaining doubt. Alina's shoulders started shaking. Mia, not fully understanding the legal mechanics but understanding adult pain instinctively, reached over and rubbed her mother's arm. Jamal looked down at his shoes so nobody would see his eyes water. Walter Green just stared ahead, lips pressed flat, veteran posture holding him up even while the rest of him sagged. "If you're still here, tell us in the comm." It's the exact line that made your blood boil. Because Patchett is the kind of word that sounds tiny until you realize what it cost. Judge Caprio turned toward Adrian Mercer for the first time in almost a full minute. "Were those your messages?" Adrian leaned back. It was subtle, but the swagger had changed. The room had moved under him and he could feel it. They were business triage communications. Properties require prioritization. Naomi Chen spoke softly. "A child nearly died." Adrian snapped his head toward her. "That is an outrageous characterization." Mia's inhaler fell from her lap and hit the floor. The sound was so small, plastic on tile, click. But in that silence, it felt enormous. Leon Briggs bent and picked it up, handing it back gently. Mia whispered, "Thank you." Judge Caprio looked at Adrian and said the line that would later appear on thousands of clips and stitches and reposts. "If your empire needs other people trapped to keep standing, it deserves to fall." Nobody moved. Adrian laughed once, not because he thought it was funny, because some people laugh when they feel cornered and want to disguise panic as disdain. "With respect," he said, "this courtroom is not the stock market, Judge. You don't get to collapse anything. That was the fourth mistake. Because threatening a judge doesn't always sound like a threat at first. Sometimes it sounds like a man trying to remind the room who he thinks has power. Caprio's eyes narrowed just enough for the room to notice. Be careful, Mr. Mercer. The moment you threaten justice is the moment you confess you fear it. That sentence hit harder than the gavel ever could have. And still, unbelievably, Adrian wasn't done. He leaned forward, voice lower now, more dangerous because he was trying to keep it contained. I built jobs in neighborhoods this city neglected. I fund campaigns. I fund scholarships. I sit on hospital boards. So let's be honest about what this is. If you make a spectacle out of me, there will be consequences for people far beyond this room. Gasps, real ones this time. Maria Lopes actually stopped typing. Dana Ruiz looked up so fast her pen rolled off her notebook. Leon Briggs took one step closer to the defense table. Judge Caprio let the silence breathe. 1 second, 2, 3. It wasn't hesitation, it was precision. Then he said, "A courtroom is the one room where your last name has no voting rights." Share this with someone who needs to hear that line, because some truths deserve to travel. Adrian's face changed color, not dramatically, just enough. The skin around his mouth tightened. A bead of sweat appeared near his temple despite the courtroom's cold air. Nala and Pierce whispered urgently now, almost visibly pleading for silence. But Adrian had crossed the invisible line rich men forget exists. The line where confidence becomes contempt and contempt becomes evidence. Judge Caprio asked Maria to note the statement for the record. Then he did something nobody expected. He called Elena Torres forward. Not because he needed more outrage, because he needed the human cost in the center of the room. Elena walked carefully, one hand on the rail. She was not polished. She was not media-trained. She was exhausted and scared and more dignified than anyone in a Brioni suit had a right to stand across from. When she raised her right hand to be sworn in, it trembled. Naomi asked just a few questions. Your name, your address, occupation. Then, can you tell the court what happened the night of August 22? Elena swallowed. I woke up because my daughter was coughing. It was not normal coughing. It was the kind when she cannot pull air in. The room smelled like hot wires and smoke. I opened the door and the hall was gray. I could not see the stair sign. Her voice cracked on the word gray. She kept going anyway. I grabbed Mia and my phone and ran. The back stairs would not open. People were hitting the door from inside. Mr. Green was on the stairs. Jamal was trying to help him. Mia was saying, "Mommy, my chest hurts." I thought. She stopped. Judge Caprio's voice softened. Take your time. Elena nodded, crying openly now. I thought this is how we die, in a building that kept telling us everything was fine. There are moments when a courtroom stops being legal and becomes moral. This was one of them. Naomi asked, did you report electrical issues before the fire? Yes, many times. Did anyone from Mercer Urban Holdings contact you after the incident? Elena laughed weakly through tears. They sent an email saying rent was still due on the 1st. That one landed like a body blow. Even Adrian's attorney closed his eyes. Walter Green was next. He shuffled to the witness stand slower than he wanted people to see. Pride does that to old men who have spent their lives fixing things with their hands. I served 2 tours, he said. Been in bad places. Never thought I'd get trapped in a smoke stairwell because a millionaire wanted a cleaner. Refinance package. The gallery murmured again. Walter lifted his wrapped wrist. This happened when the kid there tried to pull me up. That boy saved me while your people were worried about videos. He didn't point at Adrian. He didn't have to. Then Jamal testified. And if Elena gave the room pain, Jamal gave it innocence damaged too early. 17 years old, wanted to study mechanical engineering, delivered groceries on his bike after school to help his grandmother with rent. He described the heat, the shouting, the way the chain rattled and didn't give. He described turning his face into the smoke to check for a toddler he'd heard crying. He described waking up at Rhode Island Hospital with a nurse scraping dead skin from his neck. Then he said, "I missed the first week of school. My grandmother said we were lucky, but lucky shouldn't have to hurt that much." Judge Caprio looked down for a moment, then back up. People noticed that too. When calm men feel things, the room feels them harder. And just when it seemed Adrian Mercer could not possibly sink lower, the next revelation entered the room in a plain manila envelope. Luis Ortega had not only given a statement, he had included copies of internal memos. One of them was stamped August 10, 2025, subject line, Tenant Messaging Protocol. It instructed on-site staff to use phrases like isolated inconvenience, temporary odor event, and routine security adjustment when addressing hazards. It explicitly warned employees not to use words like fire risk, electrical failure, or blocked exit in written communication. Naomi held it up. "Would you describe this as standard business language too, Mr. Mercer?" Adrian didn't answer right away. And when men like him stop answering, it's rarely because they're reflecting. It's because they're calculating. But there was one thing he had not calculated. Someone else in that courthouse had brought evidence too. Hit that like button if you can already feel the next twist coming, because the envelope from City Hall was only half the story. At 10:03 a.m., while the clerk was marking the memo, a courthouse aide approached Maria Lopes and whispered in her ear. Maria looked surprised, then walked to the bench with another sealed packet. Judge Caprio read the note attached, glanced toward the back doors, and asked a single question. "Is the sender present?" A voice answered from the rear row, "Yes, Your Honor." Every head turned. The young man standing there looked like Adrian Mercer stripped of polish and filtered through sleepless disappointment. Tall, about 16, dark blonde hair falling into his eyes, prep school blazer over a wrinkled white shirt he'd clearly buttoned in a hurry. His face was pale, but his jaw was set. This was Ethan Mercer. Adrian froze. Not metaphorically, physically, shoulders locked, eyes sharpened, breath stalled. If the footage had shaken him, this did something deeper, because evidence from strangers can be attacked. Evidence from your own blood changes the temperature of the air. Nolan Pierce whispered, "Do not react." "Too late." Judge Caprio asked, "Young man, do you understand where you are?" "Yes, sir." "And what have you provided to the court?" Ethan swallowed. "Emails, voice notes, access logs from my dad's office iPad. I submitted them through the clerk this morning." Adrian was up now. "Absolutely not. He has no authority." Judge Caprio raised a hand. "Sit down." The command was not loud, but it cut through the room like steel. Adrian remained standing for a half-second too long. Leon Briggs moved. Just a shift. Just enough to remind everyone that defiance in a courtroom has a short shelf life. Adrian sat. Ethan stepped forward only when asked. His shoes squeaked once on the polished floor. He looked at the judge, not at his father. That detail mattered. Kids who have lived in the blast radius of powerful adults know eye contact can become a trap. Naomi Chen asked gently, "Why are you here today?" Ethan's answer hit the room harder than any legal exhibit. "Because my dad kept saying it was all under control. Then I heard Mia Torres coughing in a video on his tablet while he told somebody the story would pass in 2 news cycles. And I knew if I didn't come, I'd be helping him." Adrian's face went white. There it was, the shock disbelief moment, the one viewers replay, the one everybody remembers. "This is coercion," Adrian said, but his voice had changed. The old confidence was gone. What came out now sounded brittle. "He's a child. He's being manipulated." Ethan finally turned toward him. "No, Dad. I'm just old enough to know the difference between a mistake and a pattern." That line, that one line, Dana Ruiz would later say the room seemed to lean forward as if pulled by it. Judge Caprio asked if Ethan had reviewed what he submitted. Ethan said yes. He confirmed the emails were downloaded from a synced company device used during summer travel. He confirmed the voice notes were recording. NGS his father dictated to assistant staff and left in a shared internal folder. One was dated August 23 at 8:14 a.m., less than 9 hours after the fire. Maria played it. Adrian's recorded voice filled the courtroom, unmistakable and merciless. Get Ortega off-site. I don't care if you make it severance or blame. We need one narrative. Electrical issue localized. Rear exit was secured due vandalism. Remind legal those tenants are behind on rent, especially the woman with the kid. Pressure points matter. Elena shut her eyes. Walter Green shook his head slowly like he could barely process hearing his life discussed as strategy. Then the second voice note played. If the veteran pushes this, tow him. He folds after inconvenience. They all do. Walter looked straight at Adrian after that. Not angry, not loud, just wounded in a way that made everybody else angrier for him. Judge Caprio spoke into the silence. Power is tested by what you do when nobody can stop you. There was no whisper now, no side conversation. Even the air felt still. Everyone in the room knew they were watching one of those rare moments when a public mask doesn't slip. It shatters. And yet the deepest cut had not arrived. Because Ethan Mercer had brought one more thing. A letter. Not to the court, to Adrian. Written 6 months before by Adrian's mother, Lorraine Mercer, after a mild stroke left her worried she was running out of chances to say what mattered. She had died in June. Ethan found the letter in a desk drawer 2 weeks earlier and only understood why it mattered after the fire. Judge Caprio asked if it was relevant. Ethan's voice shook for the first time. It is if you want to know who my father used to be. Adrian whispered, don't. Ethan looked at him. You didn't say don't when people begged you to fix the building. The gallery inhaled as one. Naomi asked the court's indulgence. Nalan objected weakly, then stopped objecting when he realized the objection would look inhuman. Judge Caprio allowed Ethan to read only the relevant portion. He unfolded the paper carefully. Adrian, if you ever become the kind of man who makes poor people feel invisible, then every hard thing we survived taught you the wrong lesson. I did not raise you to confuse being respected with being feared, and I did not pray you out of that childhood so you could grow up and become the landlord we used to cry about. Nobody moved. Not Elena, not Walter, not Jamal, not Dana Ruiz, not Leon Briggs, not Naomi Chen, not even Maria Lopes at the keyboard. It was one of those silences that becomes its own sound. Heavy, shared, unavoidable. Adrian stared at the table. That was new too. Men like him usually stare down opponents, not inward. Drop a comment telling us whether you think that letter changed him, because from this point on, nothing in the room looked the same. What happened next was not explosive. It was worse for him. It was quiet. Judge Caprio asked a simple question. Mr. Mercer, do you wish to continue telling this court you are the victim of a political circus? No answer. Do you deny the messages? No answer. Do you deny the audio? A long pause, then finally Adrian said no. One syllable. But sometimes a single syllable is the sound of a structure cracking at its foundation. His lawyer leaned in again, probably to guide him toward careful language. Adrian didn't take it. Maybe for the first time in years, he understood that strategy and truth were not standing on the same side anymore. He looked toward Elena, then Walter, then Jamal. He stopped before looking at Ethan. I made decisions, he said. I told myself they were temporary, that once refinancing closed, once occupancy improved, once cash flow stabilized, I'd fix everything the right way. I told myself nobody was really in danger. Judge Caprio asked, and when were you going to believe the people who were living with the danger? Adrian opened his mouth, closed it, rubbed a hand over his face. The Patek watch flashed again, but now it looked ridiculous, like jewelry left on a sinking man. Naomi Chen placed the engineering report into evidence. Independent review by East Bay Structural and Electrical Consulting. Findings: long-term overloading, degraded insulation, prior evidence of arcing, unapproved egress modifications. Estimated repair cost, if done when first recommended in May, $68,400. Estimated loss after the August incident, litigation exposure excluded, more than $4.2 million. $68,000. That number hit differently because it was so small beside Adrian's wealth. People can rationalize neglect when the price of doing right sounds crushing, but when the repair would have cost less than his watch, that is when negligence begins to look like cruelty. Judge Caprio noticed the gallery reacting and said, "Let the record reflect that the amount required to prevent this was not impossible. It was simply inconvenient to someone who chose profit first." Then his knee buzzed. Adrian glanced down despite himself. One message, then another, then 5 more. He tried to ignore them, couldn't. CFO. Lender pulled 9:30 term sheet after seeing hearing clips. General Counsel. Board emergency call at 11. Need immediate response. PR Director. We are trending nationally. Need statement now. Anchor Investor. Our audio files authentic. Call me immediately. Chief of Staff. Hospital Board Chair wants your resignation before noon. The empire did not collapse all at once. It began collapsing in notifications. And everybody in that room could see it. Dana Ruiz saw it too. She would later say the physical image stayed with her more than the quotes. A millionaire who had spent a decade managing narratives suddenly lit from below by a screen full of consequences he could not swipe away. If you believe karma sometimes arrives as unread messages, like this video right now. Judge Caprio wasn't done. He turned back to Ethan. "Young man, that was not easy. You've done something very difficult today." Ethan nodded, but his eyes were wet now. "I didn't come here to destroy him." Judge Caprio asked, "Why did you come?" "To stop what he was becoming from becoming normal." There are lines written for cameras, and then there are lines that cameras wish they had been lucky enough to catch. That was one of them. Adrian finally looked at his son, really looked, not as an extension of himself, not as an inconvenience, as a witness. Maybe that hurt more than anything else. And then came the choice moment. Judge Caprio laid it out with almost surgical clarity. "Mr. Mercer, this court has authority to impose the maximum civil penalties before us, to enter findings supporting referral for criminal investigation, and to note your conduct today in connection with the contempt motion. But there is also a human question before the legal one. Do you intend to keep protecting yourself, or are you prepared to start repairing the damage you caused?" It was the first opening toward redemption anyone had offered him. And for a second, it looked like he might ruin it. He straightened, old instinct kicking back in. "I need to confer with counsel." The gallery deflated in disgust. There it was again, escape through process, hide inside procedure, turn pain into paperwork. Judge Caprio nodded once. "You may confer briefly." Nala and Pierce leaned in so close their shoulders touched. He spoke in that urgent lawyer whisper that sounds like steam. Nobody could hear the words, but everyone could read the posture. Settle, concede, contain. Adrian listened, then leaned back slowly. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, rawer. "I am prepared," he said, "to pay for the repairs." Naomi Chen didn't blink. "Repairs have already begun under emergency order." He swallowed, "Then medical costs, temporary housing." Alina's face didn't soften, not yet. Walter Green looked almost insulted. Because money, even large money, can sound pitifully small when what's actually broken is moral. Judge Caprio seemed to sense that. You still sound like a man pricing damage instead of understanding harm. Adrian took that in. For the first time, he did not push back immediately. Maybe because every defense he'd tried had already broken apart in public. Maybe because his son was watching. Maybe because his mother's words were still hanging in the room like a mirror he couldn't turn away from. Then he did something nobody expected from him. He stood. Not in anger, not in interruption. He stood and faced Alina Torres first. "I am sorry," he said. Simple words, but there's a reason apologies fail so often. They arrive without ownership, without detail, without the willingness to be small. This one nearly failed too, until he kept going. "I read your emails," he said, voice shaking now. "I saw your daughter's asthma notation. I told myself legal exposure mattered more than urgency. I was wrong." He turned to Walter Green. "I authorized pressure tactics. I treated you like a cost center. I was wrong." Then Jamal. "You were a kid in my building acting braver than every adult on payroll. I was wrong." Jamal looked stunned, so did the room. But the real emotional break came when Adrian finally looked at Ethan. "I am ashamed you had to be the adult in this family today." Ethan's chin trembled. He looked away. That was the breakdown, the real one, not loud, not theatrical, just a man running out of ways to protect his self-image. And right there, around the point where most viral courtroom stories end, this one deepened. Because justice is satisfying, mercy is harder. Share this with someone who knows consequences matter more when compassion is still possible. Because what came next changed the meaning of the entire hearing. Judge Caprio asked Alina if she wished to speak before disposition. She stood again. The room expected rage. Nobody would have blamed her. Not after the smoke, the hospital, the rent email, the humiliation of being discussed as leverage. She could have scorched him with a sentence, and the gallery would have cheered. Instead, she said, "I want him to feel this, yes. But I do not want my daughter to grow up learning punishment is the only thing powerful people understand." Caprio leaned back slightly, listening carefully. Alina continued, "I want repairs. I want safe housing. I want every tenant moved somewhere decent until the building is fixed. I want medical bills paid. I want the old people and the children checked first. And I want him to have to come see what these places look like without a camera." The room held its breath. "That is what I want." There it was, the unexpected compassion moment, not softness, not surrender, a different kind of strength, the kind that refuses to become cruel just because cruelty has been done to it. Walter Green cleared his throat. "I agree with the lady, but add one thing." Judge Caprio nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Green." Walter looked directly at Adrian. "You spend one Saturday a month for a year doing tenant walkthroughs yourself. No PR team, no suit. You hear every complaint. You smell every leak. You look people in the face." Even Jamal cracked a tiny smile at that. Then Jamal spoke up from the gallery without being asked, and Naomi almost objected before Judge Caprio waved it through. "And scholarships," Jamal said, "for kids in those buildings, since he likes to say he funds them." A few people laughed softly through tears. It was the first relief the room had felt all morning. Adrian nodded, "Yes." Judge Caprio looked at him carefully. "Do not agree to what you don't intend to do." "I intend to do it." Caprio's reply was immediate. "Intentions are comfort blankets for people who delayed too long." Another quote, another flashpoint, another moment the internet would later carve into short clips and captions. Then the hearing moved toward its climax. Naomi Chen requested maximum civil penalties, mandatory relocation compliance, escrow funding for repair, reimbursement for emergency response costs, and formal referral of the evidence package to the Rhode Island Attorney General and the Department of Housing Code Fraud Unit. She also requested the contempt motion remain active based on Adrian's conduct toward emergency personnel and his statement in court. Nolan Pierce, perhaps knowing there was no path to victory left, shifted from defense to damage control. He asked the court to consider voluntary restitution, immediate cooperation, and lack of prior formal convictions. Judge Caprio listened, asked 2 procedural questions, reviewed the citations. Then he set his reading glasses down and looked at Adrian Mercer the way a judge looks at someone when the sentence is about to carry both law and meaning. "This court cannot undo smoke in a child's lungs," he began. "It cannot give Mr. Green back the hand strength he had before that fracture. It cannot erase the fear Mr. Price carries into stairwells now. But it can say clearly, for the record and for this city, that wealth is not a permit to externalize danger onto people with fewer choices." The room was silent enough to hear the ventilation system click. He continued, "I am imposing the maximum civil penalties available under this docket. I am ordering full tenant relocation at respondent expense until the property is certified safe by independent inspection. I am ordering creation of a restricted restitution fund in the amount of $2 million within 72 hours for medical, temporary housing, transportation, and tenant support. I am referring the evidence before me to state authorities for further review, including potential fraud and obstruction issues. I am granting the city's compliance oversight request." Adrian closed his eyes once, hard. Judge Caprio wasn't finished. "On the contempt question, I am withholding final disposition for 30 days to evaluate cooperation. Do not mistake that for leniency. Mercy is not the absence of consequences. Mercy is the reason consequences can still heal." There it was, the quote that took the story beyond schadenfreude and into something bigger. But then came the twist around word 7,000. The one nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. As Maria began reading the formal compliance schedule into the record, a woman near the back stood up with a small stack of envelopes. She had been quiet all morning, mid-50s, gray cardigan, hospital badge clipped to her pocket. Name: Denise Holloway, social worker, Rhode Island Hospital Pediatric Respiratory Unit. Naomi turned. "Ma'am, you need to wait." Judge Caprio looked up. "Who are you?" She stepped forward. "Your Honor, I'm sorry. I'm not here as a witness for the city. I'm here because I recognize the child from the August intake notes, and because I have something Mr. Mercer hasn't seen." The room shifted again. Denise explained she'd been the overnight social worker when Mia Torres was admitted. During intake, Mia had asked for paper and crayon. While on oxygen, she drew a picture. Denise kept it because, in her words, sometimes children say things adults need later. She handed it to the bailiff, who brought it to the bench. Judge Caprio studied it, then looked at Elena. "May I?" Elena nodded. He held it so the room could see. It was a child's drawing of a tall building with orange scribbles for smoke, a little girl with a blue inhaler, a stick-figure boy in a red shirt helping an old man, and off to the side, a man in a suit standing beside a black car. Above him, in uneven letters, Mia had written, "Rich man forgot we are inside." There are some pieces of evidence that do not belong in court because they are too raw for procedure, but they belong to truth all the same. Adrian saw the drawing and broke. Not performative tears, not strategic emotion. His face collapsed inward like something had finally bypassed pride and hit conscience directly. He covered his mouth. His shoulders shook once, then again. Nolan Pierce reached toward him and stopped. Even his lawyer knew this had moved beyond legal management. Ethan stared at the drawing, then at his father, then back down at the floor. Judge Caprio handed the picture back carefully. "The court will not mark this as evidence. but I will remember it. Everybody in the room knew millions would watch the clips from that hearing. Everybody also knew the image most people would never forget wasn't the threat. It was the drawing. And now the story turned one last time. Because Adrian Mercer asked to speak again. Naomi objected mildly. Caprio allowed it. Adrian stood, looking 10 years older than when he'd entered. "I built my life on never being that kid again," he said, voice ragged. "The kid in buildings other people ignored. The kid whose mother argued with landlords about heat and mold and busted locks. Somewhere in trying to outrun that humiliation, I became the person she warned me about." He looked at Ethan, and my son had to drag the truth into daylight. Then he said something no one expected from a man who had spent the entire morning trying to protect assets. "I will step down from Mercer Urban Holdings effective today." The room erupted, not chaos but pure shocked sound, gasps, overlapping whispers. Dana Ruiz actually missed 2 words because she was typing too fast. Nolan Pierce turned toward him, stunned. "Adrian." "I'm done," Adrian said. He continued, now speaking toward the bench. "I'll sign governance control over to an independent receiver if required. I'll fund the restitution personally if the company delays. I'll sell the Bentley, the watch, whatever people need to laugh about online if that helps, but the fund will be there." Judge Caprio didn't smile. He didn't praise him too quickly. Wise judges know remorse can be real and still insufficient. "That would be a beginning," he said, "not an ending." Adrian nodded. "I know. Like this video, if you believe the hardest words in any language are not 'I'm sorry,' but I know." At 10:41 a.m., the hearing recessed for signatures and compliance scheduling. By 10:49, the first clipped video of Adrian Mercer threatening Judge Caprio had already crossed local news feeds. By 11:06, national accounts were reposting the line about last names having no voting rights. By noon, Mercer Urban Holdings, main lender, publicly confirmed it had suspended pending refinancing. At 12:14 p.m., the St. Gabriel Children's Hospital Foundation announced Adrian's resignation from its board. By 1:03 p.m., Providence's licensing office confirmed emergency review of all active Mercer properties. And at 2:27 p.m., Mercer Urban Holdings issued a terse statement naming interim leadership. 8 minutes of courtroom arrogance had detonated 8 years of carefully varnished reputation. That was the collapse. But the resolution took longer. Real healing always does. 3 weeks later, on October 7, 2025, Naomi Chen filed a compliance update. Tenants from Mercer Lofts West had been relocated to furnished extended-stay units in Warwick and Cranston, then to longer-term apartments screened by the city. A $2 million restitution fund had been established, then increased to $3.2 million after additional medical and relocation needs surfaced. Walter Green's wrist surgery was covered in full. Jamal Price's follow-up burn treatments were paid, along with a transportation stipend and a scholarship deposit into an education trust. Elena Torres received paid leave replacement support while coordinating Mia's respiratory care. More important than the numbers was what people began hearing from the tenants. For once, the checks cleared. For once, the hotel vouchers didn't expire overnight. For once, someone answered the phone. Adrian Mercer did step down. The board accepted it unanimously. Independent inspectors reviewed 7 other properties. 2 were temporarily vacated. Hundreds of pages of records went to state investigators. The legal consequences beyond cap. Rio's courtroom were still unfolding, and no one with sense pretended redemption erased liability. It didn't. But then came the piece nobody expected to go viral 6 weeks later. On the second Saturday in November, Walter Green posted a blurry photo to Facebook from inside a drafty basement boiler room on Broad Street. In the photo, wearing a plain gray sweatshirt and work gloves from Home Depot, crouched beside a plumber and a tenant organizer, was Adrian Mercer. No suit, no tie, no watch. Caption: man said he'd show up. He showed up. The comments exploded. Some called it a stunt. Others said good, let him work. But when 3 more residents posted photos over the next month, Adrian at a mold walkthrough, Adrian carrying boxed air purifiers, Adrian sitting in a folding chair taking notes while tenants listed problems one by one, something unexpected happened. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But attention shifted from whether he was sorry to whether he would stay. And he did. December 12, South Providence. Broken window seals in a 6-unit walk-up. January 9, Olneyville. Hallway lighting audit with city inspectors. February 6, Federal Hill. Tenant meeting about security access and lease transparency. No cameras invited. That was crucial. The photos that surfaced came from residents, not a publicist. Judge Caprio, meanwhile, said nothing publicly beyond the record. He didn't need to. His silence after the ruling gave the whole story more weight. He had done what he always did at his best. He reminded a room that dignity and accountability can stand in the same sentence. Then, in March 2026, nearly 6 months after the hearing, a letter arrived at the court. Handwritten, blue ink, 2 pages, signed by Alina Torres. Maria Lopes brought it to Judge Caprio during a quieter afternoon calendar. He read it after the docket ended. She wrote that Mia was breathing better now, that the nightmares had become less frequent, that Jamal had visited their new apartment and helped assemble Mia's desk, that Walter Green still called twice a week to check whether they needed groceries. She wrote that the city had finally inspected things the way poor families always wish someone would inspect them before disaster. She wrote that Adrian Mercer had come by one tenant meeting without warning, sat in the back, and listened for nearly 2 hours while people described years of neglect. He did not interrupt once. Then she wrote the line that made Maria Lopes take off her glasses and wipe her eyes. I still do not trust him easily, but I believe he is trying to become someone his son can look at without pain. That is the thing about justice stories people remember. They aren't satisfying because the villain loses. They endure because everybody involved is forced to reveal who they are when losing stops being optional. Months later, Ethan Mercer would give a short interview outside a volunteer build day. He didn't say much, just this: my father thought accountability would destroy him. It turned out hiding from it was what almost did. Another quote that spread everywhere. By spring, the scholarship fund Jamal had demanded was formalized under a new independent trust. It wasn't branded with Adrian's name. That was part of the agreement. 10 students from housing insecure families in Providence received awards for trade school, community college, or 4-year programs. Jamal Price was the first recipient. He chose engineering. At the ceremony, he wore a navy blazer borrowed from Walter Green's nephew and spoke for less than 3 minutes. But one line from his speech made the local evening news. A safe building should not be a luxury item. Nobody disagreed. Walter Green healed slower than he wanted, but he regained enough hand strength by April to start fixing old radios again at his kitchen table. He told anyone who asked that pain never fully leaves. You just stop giving it the only chair in the room. Alina picked up extra shifts once Mia stabilized. She also began speaking at tenant safety workshops with Naomi Chen, who invited her after realizing that policy language lands harder when somebody who lived it is the one holding the microphone. And Adrian. He sold the Bentley. That part was true. Not because the internet demanded symbolism, but because he needed liquid cash to supplement the restitution schedule after 2 insurance carriers contested coverage. He liquidated a watch collection too, closed his private box at the Harbor Club, moved out of the downtown penthouse and into a smaller condo on the east side. People online mocked the fall. Some celebrated it. Some said it still wasn't enough. Maybe they were right. Consequences should not become theater, they should become structure. That spring, during a tenant town hall at a repurposed community center on Elmwood Avenue, Adrian was asked by a resident why anyone should believe his change was real. He answered without flourish, "You shouldn't because I say it, you should only believe what stays true after the headlines leave." That answer didn't make everyone clap. Good. It shouldn't have. Redemption that demands applause is just vanity in cleaner clothes. Still, something had undeniably changed. The man who once saw pressure points now carried a notebook full of maintenance complaints and followed up personally when work orders lingered. The man who once called fear panic now funded emergency inhaler stations and independent safety audits in every converted property still under the company's control. The man who once told officers not to perform now sat through training on emergency protocol and tenant rights without speaking over anyone. Transformation is rarely cinematic from the inside. It's repetitive, humbling, boring even. It looks like showing up again when nobody is filming. That may be why Judge Caprio's final private comment about the case, shared later by a court staffer with permission, hit so hard. He reportedly said, "The first honest day in a person's life often feels like a collapse because all the lies holding the ceiling up have finally been removed." Read that again. Because that was the real empire that fell. Not just the company, not just the board seat, not just the luxury image. The inner empire. The one built from excuse after excuse. The one that says if the numbers work, the people can wait. And in the end, who stopped it? Not a rival tycoon. Not a flashy prosecutor. A judge who refused to be intimidated. A mother who kept reporting danger. A veteran who told the truth without ornament. A teenager who ran toward smoke. A son who chose conscience over blood loyalty. A little girl with an inhaler and a crayon drawing that said more than 100 legal filings ever could. This is why moments like that go viral. Not because humiliation is entertaining. Though let's be honest, seeing arrogance crack can feel deeply satisfying. They go viral because everyone watching recognizes the same question underneath them. What would I do if I had power and nobody could stop me? That's the question Judge Caprio put on the table that morning. And it's the question Adrian Mercer finally had to answer. If you made it this far, drop a comment telling us which person in this story showed the most courage. Because there's a real argument to be made for every single one of them. Like this video, if you believe justice is strongest when it protects the vulnerable, without losing sight of redemption. And hit subscribe if you want more courtroom stories where the loudest voice doesn't win, the richest person doesn't control the ending, and truth arrives right on time. A week after Alina's letter reached the court, another note came in. This one from Adrian Mercer himself, shorter, typed. No lawyer language, no branding, no signature flourish. It read, "I used to think consequences were enemies. Now I understand they can be instructions. Please thank the court for not confusing my status with my value. One had to break so the other could be rebuilt." That line never aired on television, but maybe it should have. Because it captured the entire moral of what happened in those 8 minutes and everything that followed. Status is what people can take from you. Value is what remains when they do. And on that September morning in Providence, in a courtroom full of soot memories, trembling hands, legal folders, and one judge who would not bow, everybody learned the same thing. Money can delay truth. It can complicate truth. It can hire people to rephrase truth. But it cannot outvote truth forever. So tell us below, if you were Judge Caprio, would you have shown Adrian mercy after that threat, or would you have gone even harder? We want to hear your take. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that power without character is just collapse on a timer. And if you think this story was unforgettable, wait until the next one. Because next time, We're covering the defendant who laughed at a single mother in court until one envelope turned the entire room against him.